What's going on, Colts Nation? I appreciate you joining me for another video where today we're going to talk about another rookie, another one who we think might start week one. He might not. So this one is more of a conversation, in my opinion, than what we talked about yesterday with A.D. Mitchell. If you missed the conversation about A.D. Mitchell, whether or not he's going to start, make sure after this video you go check that one out. But here we're talking about Laiatu Latu and whether or not he's going to be starting week one. And again, this is one that I think is more up in the air, right? Because you look at what happened last year when when you talk about AD Mitchell, it's you're comparing him to what Alec Pierce has done in his career, which is exactly what we did and looked at Alec Pierce's stats throughout the first 2 years of his career, and now you're looking at the defense from last year and who the Colts are bringing back, and the guys on the team and what their sack totals were. And the thing that puts this up in the air is the sack totals from these guys, especially the defensive ends from last year. 3 defensive ends led the way in sacks. 4 of the top 5 were defensive ends leading the way in sacks, which is kind of just the way it's supposed to be. Samson Ebicom at 9.5. And I think that's important because that's probably going to be the position where we're seeing Latu coming out and playing. Okay, but then you talk about the other side, and then you have Kwity Paye, and the conversation with Kwity Paye is always such a difficult one because we all like Kwity Paye the person, right? Kwity Paye as a human being, anybody would love him, right? Guy that smiles all the time. His story and what he went through to get to the NFL and to be able to achieve his dreams is the stuff that dreams are made out of, right? It's inspirational. So we all love Kwity, but when it comes to on the field, he's not necessarily the most consistent when it comes to pass rushing, but he's really good in the run game, like really good in the run game. And those are obviously the starters from last year. Like, which of those guys would Latu end up going into the lineup for? And that's the main question, right? When you look at the rest of the Colts, Dio Dangbo, we were talking about him getting more playing time at edge rusher this year. He had 8 sacks last year. DeForest Buckner had 8 sacks. Of course, he'll continue to do his thing. But then there's Tyquan Lewis, who comes in underneath DeForest Buckner, and he has 4 sacks. So a little bit of a separation there, but Tyquan Lewis is one of those guys that, coming off another year without the major injury, we were expecting him to bring on more of a role and have more of a role. And then you draft Latu, and the way that this front's going to work this year is all the way up in the air. Okay, and it's a good problem to have, right? Because the way it looks now, the Colts are one of the deepest teams at defensive end, right? With Dio becoming who Dio is, and we expect him to continue to take that next step. Kwity being solid. He's not an elite pass rusher, but he's solid. Samson last year had 9.5 sacks. He led the team. Nobody on the team got to double-digit sacks, but he had the most for us last year. So, and it was his first year with us, right? Coming from San Francisco. So it was nice to have that production. Where will Latu fit in there? A lot of people talking about, can he be a double sack production guy? And in order for that to happen, he's going to have to play a lot, especially in his rookie year when he's trying to figure things out. And that's what leads me to believe, like, yeah, he's probably going to be a guy who starts week one. But who does he start for, right? And this is where I don't know if it matters. I know for some guys it does matter. Some guys can only rush from the left side. Some guys can only rush from the right side. But then you have the elite guys. And we saw even in the game last year against the Raiders, you saw Max Crosby, one of these elite guys that ended up switching sides so that he would go against Blake Freeland. And he was having more success against Blake Freeland. So Max Crosby usually on the right side of that defense, switch to the left. The elite guys can play on either side and rush the passer from each side. So I think Latu is not really going to matter with him. It's more, what does Gus Bradley and Charlie Partridge and the defensive staff, what do they think is going to be better for us to help us win going forward? And I feel like situations are going to be situational, right? If you watch McAfee show, you've heard that saying plenty. So situations are situational, and when you think about it, like, I think Latu could end up being the starter on the left side and playing in that Leo position. But I could also see a world where you have on third downs, you're bringing in Latu. Latu's going to stay, but he's going to be on that right side, and then you bring in Kwity Paye to be on that left side, somebody to defend an option, right? We talked about all the quarterbacks we play. You get Kwity over there with as athletic as he is, as quick as he is. If a quarterback decides to roll out that way, or quick screen out that way, whatever, you get Kwity, who's good in space for a defensive lineman. That's at least so I could see a situation where we're looking at, where Latu maybe doesn't get to start week one, right? You roll out with Kwity Paye playing in that Leo position on the left side and Samson playing on the right side. But in passing situation, when you need a pass rusher to get home, put Latu in, and those could be situations where we see him get his work early in the season, and then as he continues, to come in, then maybe he gets more playing time. But man, like the way it works out, I just don't know what the Colts could do. The thing that I continue to come back to, we talked about it in the AD Mitchell video. This isn't Frank Reich anymore. Frank Reich, and being used to the way Frank Reich does things, like if Frank Reich was a coach, Latu's probably not starting week one. Like you could probably call that out. But with the new regime and Shane Steichen wanting to make sure that whoever's on the field each and every down is going to help us win games, that's where Latu could end up getting the start week one. And in that instance, how do we work it? Does he play the Leo position? Do we make Samson move? How does that work out? It'll be interesting to see how it works out. I just think, with what you see from Latu, you watch the tape of Latu and what he was doing in college and his litany of moves, and he can do everything. Like, he is an elite pass rusher ready to play in the NFL. Like, he has it, man. Like, there are just some guys, we talked about this plenty of times with receivers, there's just some guys that move different on the field. Latu is a guy that's just different, man, with his size, his speed, his athleticism, his explosion. Latu is going to be a major difference maker for this franchise. And in his first year, I would actually be surprised if he doesn't get double-digit sacks. There are 17 games in a season. I would be very surprised if Latu is not the leader in sacks on this team. I'd be surprised if he doesn't get to double-digit sacks. We start to see kind of what Dwight Freeney did. I think Freeney, I don't have the number in front of me, but I believe he had like 13 sacks his rookie year, something crazy. So I think Latu's going to be the next one, the next in line. I think he's going to be a great addition to this team, and I think there's a very good chance that he starts week one. If not, then it's because Gus Bradley and that regime, there are a lot of older guys on that side of the ball, and maybe Steichen gives them the decision on who can start. I don't know how they work that. Maybe Steichen has the final say on the entire roster, but I think he kind of defers that to Gus Bradley. It could end up being Ebicom and Paye as the starters, but honestly, by the end of the season, I wouldn't be totally surprised if it's Latu and Odengbo being the guys that we see as the starters for the Colts at the defensive line. It'll be interesting to see what happens, man. We have depth at positions now that we didn't have depth at before. Signing Ebicom last year, drafting Latu this year, all of a sudden we have pretty good depth at defensive end. Getting Josh Downs last year, getting AD Mitchell this year, we have pretty good depth at receiver all of a sudden. So feeling pretty good going into the season, even though we weren't active in free agency. The more I look at the roster, the more I think about this team and what we did last year, what we could do this year if we're able to stay a little bit healthier. Sky's the limit, man, for real. I think we can do some special things with this team, but time will tell. It's only May right now, so there's a lot of time between now and then. We'll see what happens. I'm going to want your opinion throughout this offseason as we continue talking about Colts football. So make sure you subscribe with notifications on so you continue to get notified anytime any of these videos do come out. Of course, I appreciate you stopping by for another video. As always, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and go Colts.